And today we'll be joined by Meryl Nash in a few minutes. Dr. Nash, of course, is a frequent flyer on our program. She has been fighting the World Health Organization's so-called treaty. And she is warning us that just because negotiations have stalled or are, quote, dead, which you could certainly celebrate that, it is not likely that they're going to stop from trying again in what she describes as a more secretive and sinister way. And speaking of sinister, Mike Benz joins us today. First, not that Mike is sinister, but that he has got sort of an interesting view of the blob, the world out there. He was the founder of Foundation for Freedom Online, a free speech watchdog dedicated to restoring free speech online. He was a former State Department cyber official in the Trump administration, and his job was to study the blob. And if you don't know what the blob is, he will tell you all about it. You can follow him at foundationforfreedomonline.com and on X with Mike Benz, B-E-N-Z, Cyber. Be right back. Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say. You could spend thousands of dollars and dozens of hours trying to look a few years younger, or you can skip all that and the hassle and go with what works, Genucel Skincare. Genucel is the secret to better skin. Their products are made in the USA using a proprietary technology that combines a naturally effective base with non-GMO ingredients. In fact, you might have witnessed the astonishing effects of Genucel during a recent unplanned moment of our show, when just a little Genucel XV restored my skin within minutes right before your eyes. That is how fast these products work.
I know I'm a snob about the products I use on my face. Everybody knows it. Every time I go to the dermatologist's office, they're just rows and rows of different creams. Retinols, vitamin C cream, under eye cream, night creams.
Scrubs.
And then when I get to the counter, they're overpriced. All kinds of products that you can all find at Genucel.com.
Susan and I love Genucel so much, we've created our own bundle so you can try our favorite anti-wrinkle creams, correcting serums, under-eye treatments. Say goodbye to those fine lines, forehead wrinkles, skin redness, even those dark under-eye bags. Women and men of all skin types, Genucel has got you covered. Order right now at Genucel.com/Drew to save 50%, actually over 50%, and you'll get a free luxury spa box plus free shipping. That is Genucel.com/Drew, GENUCEL.com/DREW. Let's go ahead and bring up the schedule, Caleb, if you would mind, for the upcoming week. We've got Kelly Victory coming in tomorrow. I'm going to take over the show because I'm going to be out of town with Brian Hooker. Also, we've got a very interesting guest coming up, Winston Marshall coming. Naomi Wolf, Brian O'Shea. Look at the list up there. Melissa McAfee, she's the Pfizer whistleblower. That's what's coming up. We're sort of expanding our base of guests this next couple of weeks. It should be very, very interesting. Today is no exception. As I said, we have Mike Benz in here. Let me give you some more of his particulars. Mike, of course, was an early in warning us about the excesses of, amongst other things, the security infrastructure in our country, and maybe security is sort of a kind way to describe it. And in fact, we now have newly revealed emails from National Institute of Health officials that were clearly shown attempts to conceal communications about COVID-19 origin and EcoHealth Alliance. Mike Benz joins us now. Thank you for coming again, Mike.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, these emails are absolutely extraordinary. I don't know that I've seen.
Tell me about them.
I don't know that I've seen a dump like this that is so explicit in many years. I mean, a lot of these times there's subpoenaed documents from Congress, and there's one or two things that are somewhat shocking, but maybe there's some sort of defense. But the better part of this week, I've been collecting different jaw fragments of mine off the floor as one email after another. Sometimes a crime happens, and there's lots of conspiracy theories about what the crime is, and there's a lot of oftentimes there's a lot of theories that seem to they go. People say, well, okay, it might not be the worst case scenario, but some fraction of it is true. And even if it's 25% true, it's still a big scandal. And in this case, what we're now seeing with these emails and about the whole COVID origin story is it's like 250% true. It's like way worse than even like what conspiracy theorists were alleging, because what we see them doing here, and by them, I'm referring to Tony Fauci, Peter Daszak, David Morens, Fauci's right-hand man. They were just busted in about 10 to 12 of the most flaming emails I've ever seen. There are things where Fauci's right-hand man, Dr. David Morens, is saying, that he learned all these tricks from the FOIA lady about how to delete things after a FOIA request has come in, and telling people not even to send things to his official Gmail, creating a Proton mail or creating a Gmail, or hand delivering documents in person so that the American people who pay their salaries can't actually find out what they're thinking about, especially related to origins. I actually wrote down some of these. The best way to avoid FOIA hassles is to delete all emails when you learn a subject is getting sensitive. They complain about a news cycle about gain of function getting out and COVID origins coming from a lab leak. And Dr. Morin says that email somehow fell into the hands of a congressman, probably via a FOIA of someone who didn't delete it, as I did. And then in parentheses, he writes, delete all of Peter's emails and others related to origin. And then he says, when the shit started hitting the fan. So this is Fauci's right-hand man bragging that he deleted all of his emails about COVID origins when the shit started hitting the fan. And he also deleted that of Peter Daszak, one of the NIH major contractors, who specifically was given $53 million from USAID, which I should note is a frequent CIA conduit, to do bat coronavirus work related to the Wuhan lab. Also, intentional misspellings in order to prevent FOIA disclosures, telling people don't send me things, calling for a PR strategy referring to the orange blob, meaning Trump, not themselves. And bragging about ways to try to make the PR seem, quote, Trump infected, and then hoping that these bad news cycles go away as long as Rand Paul doesn't amplify. Joking with each other about how they deserve kickbacks for all of their hard cover-up work. At one point, Dr. Morins emails Peter Daszak saying that he deserves a kickback for all of his hard work covering up their tracks, and Daszak responds, well, you certainly deserve it. I mean, if they spent half as much time practicing medicine as they did committing felonies, covering up their crimes, we might actually have a functional medical system in this country.
Wow. So what do you make of all this? Do you have we don't know yet what they were covering up, right? We don't even know if they were covering up the origin. They may have just been covering up God only knows what. I mean, you could easily speculate gain of function research or the international relationships that we maintain or the flow of our tax dollars into these organizations. What do you imagine, or do you have any evidence, maybe not using your imagination or using your experience and your imagination, that they were up to?
Well, I can use my eyes as I read this quote where he says that email somehow fell into the hands of a congressman, probably via FOIA of someone who didn't delete it, as I did. Parentheses, delete all of Peter, meaning Peter Daszak, Peter's emails and others related to origin. So he is explicitly saying that he and his cronies deleted all emails related to origin, quote, when the shit started hitting the fan. So 1 + 1 is 2. The emails related to COVID origins were deleted when the shit started hitting the fan. This is right after saying that he learned these tricks from their FOIA lady about how to delete things after a request comes in. So, what we have here is the Enron situation, where everyone knew there was smoke. Everyone could see the billowing flames of fire. And then you get the stories about how they're up until 3 a.m. night after night deleting all of the records. Well, now we have them, doing the digital paper shredder of everything. And at this point, you have to say it the very, very, very least, it flips the burden of proof. If they themselves are so terrified of their own words, their own documents, their own emails, their own communications, to the point of deliberately misspelling things, setting up alternate phones, burner phones, proton mail accounts, email accounts, Jimmy rigging it with the FOIA lady, deliberately doing it when the shit started hitting the fan. This flips the burden of proof. As I see it, they need to prove to us that it was not a lab leak, because just from this alone, we see they were so terrified of what they all thought it was that they immediately deleted it. And they deleted it because they knew it would look so bad if their own words had to be played on a jumbotron later.
And I saw isn't it true they're putting dollar signs in where there should have been an S and using exclamation points for L's or something? These are ways to avoid the sort of word search of a FOIA document, I'm imagining, right? And on top of that, they're actually deleting stuff. Yeah, but I guess I can't believe it, right? It's so flabbergasting to think that this was so overt. This is a question I asked you last time we talked about the blob. And I want to get back into the blob conversation a little bit too. And by the way, I'm wondering where Michael Schallenberger is for this particular dump. Is he going further deeper? Are you going deeper on this dump?
Well, this sort of gets to an issue above this. I mean, frankly, we didn't need these to already have a very damning case about COVID origins and COVID cover-ups. My specialty is on social media censorship, and especially the role of the U.S. government and the foreign policy establishment, the blob, that is the Pentagon, the State Department, and the CIA. And their fingerprints are all over this thing from top to bottom, 7 ways from Sunday, to the point where you can't look away from it. And like I said, it shifts that burden of proof. You have to assume that that's what it was because of how hard they worked. Instead of doing a real job, their job seemed to be professional cover-ups for years on end. But because of that, I think what remains at this point is to trace it up the chain. This is one of these things where you have when we can go through all the different roles of the intelligence agencies and the Pentagon and the State Department in all of this, but what's missing at this point is what really was COVID in retrospect. You looking back at it, what was this? There's the question of, okay, let's just say you assume it's a lab leak. Well, lab leak sort of gets you into a question of, well, was it an accident? Was there a purposeful release? There are a lot of strange issues around past pandemics in the past 2 decades where they've served a very useful geopolitical purpose. We know that the history of the biosecurity program and bioweapons program had very deliberate planning of the use of sort of semi-pandemic type gain-of-function diseases in order to drop on other countries to induce crises. This gets back to a lot of the history of the Rocky Mountain Lab in Montana and the work that was done on tick-borne diseases and gain-of-function in the 1950s around the time of the Korean War. It gets to a lot of very, very strange questions around the use of vaccine clinics and the use of pandemics to have a kind of crisis predicate to put military boots on the ground in regions. You had a very strange example in 2013, for example, when the CIA was running fake vaccine clinics in Pakistan in order to collect the biometrics of the population there. But there's
oh my God.
At this well, and you have cover for medical services for military all over. I mean, even in 2014, the U.S. military got busted using a USAID HIV clinic as a front to run military commandos into South America. I mean, this is something that has been done many, many times. They've gotten busted many, many times using these sort of fake humanitarian predicates to establish military beachheads because nobody suspects that the aid workers are basically working for the military. And there's a lot of there, but so many things happened during COVID. There's so that it leaves you in a kind of speculative guess of which one of these dozens of monstrosities was the purpose, or was it a combination? You had, for example, we have mass mail-in ballots in this country. That's never happened before. Universal mass mail-in ballot voting. There were controversies around mass mail-in ballots in the 1862 election of Abraham Lincoln. Where newspapers were fighting with each other about whether or not these things should even be allowed. And now it's de rigueur. It's now our new way of voting. That's been shoehorned in from COVID. You had a mass transfer of wealth. You had arguably the greatest wealth transfer in our country's history, because of all the small and medium-sized businesses getting shut down, everything moving to these online tech conglomerates, Amazon cleaning up with the bricks and mortars get decimated. You had the insanity of the COVID relief funds and all the banks that made out like bandits from that. You had this biosecurity state come in with these vaccine clinics, and now you have basically contact tracing on every app on your phone that now gets filtered to the intelligence world through that. When the same time, just 2 years before COVID, that same intelligence community demanded under ID 2020 that by the year 2020 we would have all of these, basically surveillance tracking device mechanisms that would be legalized domestically. And lo and behold, that was accomplished through COVID-19. There are so many, and then you got Pfizer and Moderna making $100 billion just off of the vaccine sales alone from them. There's so many, at this point, and then we have to sort of acknowledge that what really was even COVID. You had a very strange situation where the flu totally disappeared, completely disappeared. And when you add up the numbers of what COVID cases were, with the flu just completely disappearing, which had existed for millennia, as old as humans are, the flu existed right up until 2019 to 2022. It just took a little, went on hiatus. What happened there? You had this situation where it turns out that now in retrospect, we know that it was an identical death rate, fatality rate with COVID and the flu. And you had the direct targeting of the security state to prevent you from even mentioning the comparable fatalities of COVID and the flu. So, at this point, these emails are fantastic. These are felony crimes. If we had an actual Justice Department in this country, not one as captured by the blob as the medical services are, we'd move directly to the trial phase of this, because they're at least guilty of felony obstruction. But as I see it, the investigation sort of has to get to what is the role of pandemics in our military, our statecraft, and our intelligence structure. We'll just pause like one last thing to say this. It was a major international scandal in 2013 when the CIA got busted running fake vaccine clinics. And at the time, it was one of these things where there was a lot of hemming and hawing. Oh, it was sort of an accident. We shouldn't have done it, but we were trying to catch Osama bin Laden in the waning days of all that. So extraordinary measures for extraordinary times kind of thing. Well, okay, where else are they doing it? Are they doing it in Latin America?
Right.
Are they doing it in Africa? They're doing it in Central Asia. We need a total accounting, essentially, of the size of the biosecurity state and the role of these medical countermeasures and all of them. And I think until we have that sized up, we're not going to be able to really look in our rearview mirror and even understand what the car crash we all just witnessed.
I am familiar with the flu COVID data you're talking about, but I can assure you, having been working clinically during COVID, it was worse than the flu. I promise you. It was a nasty virus, and it had very specific characteristics to it that we had never seen before in terms of the way it played out. But we figured out ways to treat it, and we have ways to deal with it. Yeah. Okay.
It felt different.
I had it too.
Idea. It felt different. Right. Yeah. I only meant to suggest that I find it strange that the flu completely disappeared. It was like it was cannibalized. I mean, we had this situation where everything, if you got in a car crash or a motorcycle accident, these we don't really know the death toll. These conflations of with coronavirus versus from coronavirus. But I'm sorry, I'll pause and.
No, I agree. Our data was messed up. We were talking to John Bodwin about this just last week, but that's a separate issue. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now. I want to understand. I want to understand the blob's motivation. That's the part that I'm really every time you come on, I start struggling with. What are they doing? And you just mentioned the Pakistan false or phony vaccine program. I mean, they get away with this stuff and we don't do anything. And does anybody show any concern about it? I mean, is there something above the blob making these decisions? Is the Military Intelligence Committee in the Congress, do they know about this stuff? Or is there something that motivates this that we just, I don't know, we don't get to talk about? Or what do you think?
I suspect that news is global. And so when you launch an investigation as to our own intelligence or State Department or military malfeasance, if you blow it up on a jumbotron and you try to get accountability domestically, you've just created an international scandal. You've just given ammunition to China and to Russia and to Iran and to Venezuela. Right. And to anyone in Europe who wants to say, well, the United States is a bad actor on the world stage. Look at what just came out. This is stuff that I dealt with at State when we would try to argue that other countries shouldn't be using Huawei or other kind of Chinese IT infrastructure because of a backdoor from the CCP. And the answer we'd always get back is Snowden. Mm-hmm. We know. We read the news. Here in Europe, we read the news here in Asia. We know that. How are you any different or better than China when it comes to that security concern? You're going to have to come up with a better reason. You're going to need to offer us more in aid.
There's an interesting question in here. There's an interesting, almost philosophical question embedded in what you just said, which is this the natural history of modern democracies, that they go this way, they all go this way, and that they're all in this weird game together? This whole, I was thinking this morning about the Roman Republic and how this country sort of, had a republic system where virtue was and honor and and a collaborative world was the way, and we've gone from that to this, And again, you're bringing up that the EU looks at that and goes, yeah, you're that way too, and so is China, so is Russia, and probably so are we. So is that just what has happened to us? Is there a remedy for this? And is it what happens, and is there a remedy?
Well, it seems to be. I mean, when you look at, for example, the history of oversight of the intelligence community, we created the CIA in 1947 at the time when the rules-based international order was all shifting from empire by conquest to empire by political control and creating vassal states because you control the politicians in that country. And so everything in our military and our intelligence world shifted. We created the CIA so that we could do all these black ops and covert actions with plausible deniability. We no longer had a Department of War. In 1948, we changed its name to the Department of Defense, where instead of warring you, we would defend you to death. We call it forward defense. We're not offensively attacking you. We are forward defending ourselves. And so everything became it's coming right for us. And so using that as a predicate for that. But we had about 30 years where there was no oversight of the CIA whatsoever. From 1947 to 1975, there was no mechanism for Congress to be able to investigate the CIA. It wasn't until the Church Committee hearings in 1975 that we even established a House Intelligence Committee and a Senate Intelligence Committee for oversight of the CIA. And then very quickly, from the 1970s to the 1980s, there were a lot of CIA scandals, including Iran-Contra and these regime change operations spilling into the public light. And then basically after Iran-Contra in 1985, I don't think there has been a single hearing on CIA operations going on. We had a brief moment in time in the mid-aughts when CIA torture programs became subject to congressional oversight and scrutiny. But this is a weird thing to say about torture, if you can sort of forgive me for saying it, but it's actually fairly tame when you look at when you look at the sort of grand geopolitical chessboard of what our intelligence services actually do. When you orchestrate a civil war and a regime change tens of thousands of people died. When you cook up a false predicate around weapons of mass destruction, something that you know to be false, that's basically recycled, that you heard from the New York Times. I mean, that's what Colin Powell said, and you use that as a predicate to go in and get 100,000 people killed. I mean, there's no oversight we have not had actual red-blooded, full claws, full tooth oversight of the CIA in this country in 40 years, or even of our own military, abuses and wrongful actions. And I think part of this is because they are considered so essential to statecraft that if we dig up our own skeletons from that closet, we hold it up for our own people to see. Now the whole world sees our skeletons, and then there goes the American century. There goes American hegemony. And so, we have this really difficult issue with foreign and domestic, and it just so happens the people in charge of oversight, their whole worldview is colored by the global, by the foreign. The House Intelligence Committee, the House Foreign Affairs or House Senate Foreign Relations, all those people are focused on what other countries, because that's the nature of intelligence, at least it should be. And so they look at it as what is going to be the blowback for that on the world stage. And so because of that, because we need to keep it a secret from the rest of the world, we need to keep it a secret from our own citizens.
And should be, you mentioned last time how by calling us various things, they were able to turn the blob inward to the country and use the intelligence muscle against the U.S. citizens, which was never meant to be the use of it. And also you said, I guess it was Colin Powell, knew something was to be false because he only had read in the New York Times. But I'm wondering if right in that moment is some insight into how so much of what goes on these days is just plain old hysteria. That the hysterics come out of not just the public and not the press, but the actual blob itself is just prone to hysterics, including the Defense Department. It makes me really wonder about that. But I'm going to let you answer that after the break. Got to take a break. And then I'm interested in the remedy for all this, or what we should be doing or thinking. But you tell me first about the blob and hysteria, and then we'll talk about remedy right after this, okay?
Yep.
Let's talk about aging, because everyone wants to know how to slow it down. For almost a decade, I've been taking a healthy aging supplement called True Niagen. This supplement boosts NAD, that's something that cells can't live without. It's done with a patented form of nicotinamide riboside called NR, or Niagen. It's more efficient and more scientifically reviewed than NMN or other NAD boosters. True Niagen is truly the best way to boost NAD levels, and it's made by Remedies. They are the gold standard in the NAD space. Dr. Charles Brenner, the scientist who discovered the NAD boosting potential of NR, explains.
And the center of the metabolism that allows the conversion of food into energy is NAD coenzymes. And NAD gets disturbed in the aging process. And as we're exposed to conditions of metabolic stress, Niagen, which is the form of NR that was developed by Remedies, is the best and the only fully legal form of NR. And this is really the gold standard for NAD boosting vitamins.
I love this product. I urge you to try it. Go to drdrew.com/True Niagen for 20% off your order. That is drdrew.com/True Niagen, TRUNIAGEN, and enter Dr. Drew at checkout, DRDREW, enter it at checkout for 20% off. There are 4 distinct and outstanding medical kits from the Wellness Company: a first aid kit, a travel emergency kit. I was very instrumental in developing that one. I love it. A COVID emergency kit. But let's unpack their medical emergency kit, the one that gives you immediate access to treatment for a variety of medical conditions. Here's the kit: pneumonia, upper respiratory infections, skin infections, gastrointestinal infections. You'll have on-hand medication that will even serve as immediate prophylaxis against a sexually transmitted infection, rapid intervention for Lyme and other tick-borne illnesses. Of course, we've added Tamiflu to our kits in case the avian flu should become human-to-human transmissible. Then we know something is up and we want to be ready. And look, we want to be covered for bioterrorism even. And of course, the Nobel Prize-winning antiparasitic ivermectin, and a how-to guide and a virtual consultant. Get access to these prescription meds by going to drdrew.com/TWC to save 15% off. That is $30 off the medical emergency kit, drdrew.com/TWC for 15% off the kit and any of their kits or their supplements. Do it now, drdrew.com/TWC.
Dr. Drew said the best way to quit drinking is by going cold turkey, and he's a doctor, so why would you question doctors?
Dr. Drew called me unfixable.
Well, of course, we try to walk the walk with our sponsors. But in the case of Paleo Valley, we also drink the drink. You all know about the bone broth because we talk about it all the time. We drink it all the time. But especially when it comes to putting that chocolate in our coffee every day, which Susan does without exception. And now my coffee of choice also happens to be Paleo Valley product. Their special proprietary organic blend is made with coffee fruit extract and 8 functional mushrooms that offer cognitive support, and you'll feel it. They're full of phenols, of course, and I just drank a cup just now with some of the bone broth. Low acid, easier on your stomach. There's a promise of purity because it is lab tested for mycotoxins or mold. And as for the bone broth, as I said, it's made from real bones, grass-fed finished beef, contains collagen, glycine, and of course, the important amino acids. Go to drdrew.com/Paleo Valley for 15% off your first order and 20% off when you subscribe. That again is drdrew.com/Paleo Valley. Thank you for that, everybody. We appreciate you supporting those. And True Niagen has some interesting stuff coming up too. We're going to bring Dr. Amy in to talk to us about reproductive health and women in their 30s when NAD starts to drop, maybe improving their reproductive potential with True Niagen. So I love that stuff. I use it every day. These are all things we are very, very, very fortunate to be supporting. So let's bring Mike Benz back in. We are talking about remedies for this and also discussing hysterics and how the blob is prone to the same hysterics that the media and the public seems to be sort of very deeply what's the word I'm looking for? Vulnerable to? Is that because we have filled the roles of the blob with people that are like the public, prone to hysteria?
Well, there's an amazing quote here I actually just sent to your producer over the break here, and this is from a 2016 article by Dr. Peter Daszak, the same person who we covered in the first segment, who's deleting the smoking gun emails and bragging about how they should be getting kickbacks for all the cover-up work they did. And this is from a 2016 article called Developing Medical Countermeasures for Coronaviruses. And they're complaining about how the main problem is they're not making enough money because investors in a pan-influenza vaccine are only invested during a crisis or at the height of a crisis. And so here he writes, and this is a direct quote, this is on the topic of hysteria. To sustain the funding base beyond the crisis, we need to increase public understanding of the need for medical countermeasures such as a pan-influenza or pan-coronavirus vaccine. A key driver is the media, and the economics follow the hype. We need to use that hype to our advantage to get to the real issues. Investors will respond if they see profit at the end of the process. So this is the guy who makes his money. Daszak got a $53 million grant from USAID for the bat coronavirus work just ahead of the outbreak of COVID. And here he is saying that the way to get money to flow through this whole system is to create hysteria, to create hype. And that the key driver of that hype is the media, and that the economics, the payoff for the Pfizers and the Modernas and all the hedge fund and private equity firms that will invest on that basis is the hype driven by the media, and that they will invest because they'll see profit at the end of the process, meaning they will see that the hype will create the perceived need for this pan-coronavirus vaccine. So, you have it right there. The hysteria that we all saw, which was, apparently basically trained to our heads almost at the barrel of a gun, given how much of this money came from Pentagon contractors for this media spin, how much of it came from places like the National Science Foundation, which was basically set up as the military's kid sister in the scientific development world, how much of it was given out through State Department grants, and how much of it, I mean, you had hundreds of millions of dollars on the PR of all of this, all told, between NIH, CDC, NIAID, the Pentagon, the National Science Foundation, the State Department, USAID, and others. And here, you have it point blank from basically the guy at the center of it himself saying, this is exactly what we need to do. We need to create hype. Even when people when they're not in a state of fear, then they're not going to put out all the money for this. So if we want to hear that cash register cha-ching, we need to create a Clockwork Orange operation where people are put in a state of fear all day.
So what do we imagine this is? Is it narcissism? Is it hubris? Is it greed? Is it all of the above? What do these folks imagine they're doing? Of course, they imagine they're doing something good, because that's always how real social evil gets done. But what is this? What are we looking at here?
It's a good question. I suspect everybody who's involved in it is, has their own particular set of vices that draw them in. Certainly, the whole gain of function field is, what's sometimes called dual use. You are creating a souped up super virus nominally. So, at least this is what the PR on it is, so that you can create cures for the, even souped up monster super viruses. And so, I suspect that there is a kind of God-like feeling. You are playing God with this. You are creating new forms of life. When you read Bobby Kennedy's 2 books on the Wuhan situation, the real Anthony Fauci, and the second one he just put out called the Wuhan Cover-Up, it spends a fair amount of time sort of going through how much more money is involved in the gain of function studies, how much easier they are to do than other kinds of scientific papers, because it's a relatively straightforward process. You deliver a result right away. Here's how I engineered some new freak virus of nature, as opposed to 10 years of esoteric theory. You're right in the action of it. And I suspect I suspect there's a godlike feeling. You feel very important. It's a lot of money. I would put greed certainly, far up there. But then you have a lot of people who aren't necessarily very talented, who aren't necessarily the best and the brightest, but they are made the most famous doctors on earth. They are thrust, they are here to save humanity in a crisis. We look to people like Dr. Peter Hotez. I'm not to be disrespectful, but I don't know that Peter Hotez could have made it in any other field. I mean, the motor doesn't run particularly hot there, and there's almost no skill set other than a kind of PR flack in a kind of JV, Bill Nye the Science Guy sort of thing that he could, and yet he's became the face of this. There's
what bothered me, I got to tell you, let me just give you some feedback. What bothered me, I have no quarrel with Dr. Hotez, except that he is a pediatrician. He has no adult medical training. And when I spoke to him, he was freaking out about routine complications that we see in adult medicine as some sort of extraordinary. I remember walking away, shaking my head, going, what is he talking about? This is what happens when old people get sick. Oh, he's a pediatrician. He's never taken care of an old person. So he's freaking out about what he's hearing. And I would never take care of a kid. I have no judgment there, no training. He only takes care of kids. So this is, and by the way, file in your amongst your smoking guns out there, most, at least authorities in public health, state level certainly, are pediatrician, because they are the vaccine program creators and they understand these things because they're pediatricians. I wouldn't deem to do that. But when it comes to an adult pandemic, well, now they're completely out of their league, which was one of the things that caught me during COVID. No one was ever talking. I kept asking, are you talking to an infectious disease doctor? Did an infectious disease specialist tell you to close the schools in Los Angeles? No, they did not. Why did you not consult with somebody whose expertise is this and make a huge decision that's going to affect the lives of millions? It's the right thing to do, is what they said to me on television. So I've got it on tape now where they said that to me. And I understand things were a little unclear at the beginning, but then open them back up again after consulting with somebody the way Florida did. Florida held a panel and consult with a bunch of experts. And he went, okay, I've read everything, read the literature you provided me. I've heard your testimony. I think I'm going to open things back up again. And now we have got a perfect A/B test. Florida versus California. Which one did better? What do you think? Guess what? So anyway, sorry about that. That was my public service announcement for the day.
Data. Right. I mean, look how many people moved from
Somebody with
California.
common sense out there.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
common sense was not happening at all.
Yeah, no kidding. That's just anything pragmatic was completely crushed. And this is what this FOIA dump shows us, that anybody attempting to use their brain or to say something reasonable had to be crushed. Now, you said something early on in the last half hour. You said something about going straight to court or straight to I don't know what you said. To discovery or something. Do you think there's going to be some sort of solution in the courts? This is back to remedy. What do we do?
Not under a Biden administration. This is one of these things where we're at a very weird moment in American history. I don't know that we've ever been here before. And we've had presidents assassinated, a couple of them. We've never had a president indicted, let alone 91 felony charges, FBI raiding their house, 4 separate criminal cases with those 91 felonies. I mean, we have a Justice Department that is completely off the rails. I mean, it's almost, it's probably the most corrupt institution in all of Washington. And that is not for lack of heavy competition. So the idea of somebody being arrested by the Justice Department when they are so in bed with the White House, you had this relationship.
Well, but again, it's not corruption the way the where our lawmakers have been. We think of corruption as money and interest, while I think the judges just have a belief system. They believe they're doing the just cause. They believe in what they're doing, and they have a thought system that informs them. And I think anyone arguing with you, I'm trying to just present the other side, would say, oh, no, they're doing God's work. They're presenting an insurrectionist from becoming the president of the United States. And so this is this weird world where, do you remember Yanni and the two sounds, or the yellow and the blue dress? Where this is two different views of the world, and we can't seem to reconcile it. And that feels like something we've never been in before.
Well, certainly. I mean, it is balkanizing the country because of the huge erosion in trust. I mean, this is one of these things where I think because of how much the world turned on its head when Trump won the 2016 election, it's splintered everything. The urge to destroy or effectively judicially assassinate him, from every direction, has led to every instrument of American life being weaponized in this process. I think that we've all seen the politicization of things in schools and in sports, in video games, and medicine.
That's what we're talking about.
It's the common ground that we used to have because it was just politics. Well, the politics and the culture have completely merged, and so now nothing's just every element of culture is feeds into the hearts and minds of people, and so it becomes a pawn in the politics game.
Is there any model in history where there's been solutions other than a strong man coming in and Napoleon stepping in? That seems to be history's solution, is literally Machiavelli's prince stepping up. But I'm wondering if we, because of our strength of 50 independent states, and we have so many interesting aspects to our system, I feel like we could find our way through this. Maybe it's just, there's just, as my friend Adam Carolla always says, just safe spaces and octagons. We just separate into our different localities.
I like that. We'll know, I think, a lot more, this time next year. I think that what plays out, even in the next week or two, we'll know the status of this first Trump trial. That is going to make the country's position in a different place. And again, in a weird way, this is related to medicine, because the question of whether or not you can, you had this strange situation where at the same time Trump was being indicted for mishandling classified documents. You had Joe Biden mishandle classified documents. You had a special prosecutor from the Justice Department investigate it and say Joe Biden committed these crimes. He mishandled the documents. He did so deliberately. But we think that a jury in D.C. would not want to convict him because he presents in a jovial way and he is, he's sort of old and a bit senile. And, so even though it's the exact same, that's the difference between 1,000 years in prison and getting away scot-free. It's the exact same set of facts, but just one prosecutor's discretion. And, that's what rule of law now turns on in this country. And you can see a very similar thing, I think, with respect to getting justice about COVID. The fact is the Trump White House, tapped Tony Fauci and Dr. Birx and all that stuff played out under Trump's nose. And I think it's rare that you'll see a Trump supporter who will completely absolve Trump of all of that, although it was sort of a shot from the dark that no one really saw coming. But the fact is it was all very much working with this kind of shadow Biden realm. If you remember, they even withheld the announcement of the Pfizer vaccine until 2 days after, or I think it was 4 days after. It was literally the very next week. They had already, I think in October of 2020, they had already internally, said that they were ready to make the announcement, and they held off on it so that Trump couldn't get the credit for it on Election Day in 2020. That shows how deep the Pfizer world was with Team Biden. The idea that Team Biden's Justice Department would then turn around and indict those people seems very low probability to me. There may be one or two people who land on one or two grenades, but I can't imagine a Biden administration having anybody at the senior leadership pay anything other than maybe a civil fine. And even that I would probably bet against. So it's going to take new leadership.
So back to remedies. Remedies. What are our remedies? What's the average citizen do?
Well, you could vote for pretty much anybody. You could vote for a ficus plant, for president, and that would result in more cleaning house than what we currently have. The fact is personnel is policy, and the biggest thing that changes when a new government turns over is that the new governance mechanism puts in place the people, who are there to reform the government. And whether that's Donald Trump or Bobby Kennedy, or like I said, pick a random inanimate object at Walgreens, and it would do a better job staffing a less corrupt government than the one we currently have. But the other thing is talk about all of this. Share this video, share it with your friends and family and loved ones. Be lovable but mildly annoying about these things. We have, a level of free speech to talk about this now that we did not before. We were all crushed on social media in 2019, in 2020, in 2021, and 2022. And it is very much a brand new world now with alternatives available on Rumble and with almost total free speech on X and a security in your platform. You couldn't talk about any issues with vaccines, mandates, masks, lockdowns, conspiracy theories. You were banned from talking about COVID origins. And now, that's all possible, which means who would have thought a couple of years ago that we would even be able to muster the political capital to have a congressional subcommittee on COVID origins, who's turned up all of this. Tony Fauci is now set to testify in front of Congress. So, accountability is always slower than you want and less satisfactory than you want. But the motor engine of it is politicians feeling like heroes because it's on the tip of everyone's tongue talking about it. And when they go in and take some action, they are rewarded as heroes. So the predicate for a politician doing something heroic is for you to be already talking about it so that they get the signal and feel that sort of carrot and stick to go to bat for you.
Perfect. That's a great place to wrap up. Caleb, what did you put up there about the giant meteor and ended already? What was that?
It's one of those, it's a parody sign, the bumper sticker. It's a parody of Bernie Sanders' sign. And instead of voting for anyone, it says vote for the giant meteor 2024 just ended already.
And the Foundation for FreedomOnline.com. Mike, what's coming up there? What should we look for?
So I'll be doing a video series shortly on censorship laundering to show how the whole of society model works with respect to how the government, the private sector, civil society, and media all coordinate the censorship of targeted narratives. And then later this month, we'll have a big series on on what's behind the global government censorship cascade happening from Brazil to Australia.
Well, when is that one going to, the first one coming up? When do you expect that to be posted?
Yeah, this week we're kicking off our video series on censorship laundering, and then next week is our target for the big report we've been working on for about a month and a half here.
So if you don't mind, I have to give a talk up in British Columbia in later June, and I'm preoccupied with the mass formation and how people get hysterical and why we're so damn hysterical and how it happens in history. But of course, with giving you attribution, I want to talk a little bit about the censorship part and the propaganda part, so people understand how this, they turn up and down these hysterias. So, but if you don't mind, I'm gonna call on your foundation.
I'd love to. All right. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here. And we hope to see you again very soon. That is Mike Benz. Coming up, we are going to talk a little more about where we need to keep talking. And that is with Dr. Meryl Nass. You can find her at Nass, N-A-S-S, Nass Meryl, N-A-S-S Meryl, M-E-R-Y-L. And doortofreedom.org is where you can find posters and whatnot. And there's an update from Dr. Nass regarding the World Health Organization. I don't dare call it a treaty. I just can't get that. I choke on that. So I prefer to call it a so-called treaty. Please welcome Dr. Meryl Nass. And while we're welcome back. Let me give people your particulars, so if they've not seen you speak here before, they understand. Caleb, there we go. Dr. Nass, of course, board-certified physician, 40 years of experience in all areas of internal medicine, nationally recognized experts on epidemics, and MIT trained prior to going to medical school where'd you go? Was it Brown, Dr. Nass? Is that where you went to medical school? I forget. I think you're muted.
Yeah, started med school in New Jersey, got married, and moved to Mississippi, where my husband was a faculty member.
Oh, so interesting. That's
graduated from the University of Mississippi.
Fantastic. And then internal medicine, and then many, many years of that. All right. So give us an update on a World Health Organization. When I saw that they had given up, seeming sort of ignominiously, I thought, okay, good, this is it. And I saw some of your delight online, and then that turned to, hold on, everybody. The fight is not over.
Yeah. So the thing about the WHO is, yes, it got a little hit at the knees, but it's going to keep trying to move forward. So there are two documents. There were amendments to an international health regulations and a new pandemic treaty, which is called the Pandemic Agreement. Nations, about 50 people in two committees, 50 each, were negotiating these two documents for 2 years. And they never were able to come up with a consensus on them. They didn't come up with a finished agreement. They finally ended it on Friday. And so that is something for us to be very happy about. They couldn't get people to agree, nations to agree. But of course, the people behind the WHO who have bought and paid good money for it are not going to give up. So they want to continue negotiating these documents. And if possible, have a few of the amendments get approved this week so that they can claim a partial victory and say there's reason to keep going. Thing is, even if the WHO fails to get either agreement, the UN is geared up to do the same thing. So the UN General Assembly meets in September. And the Secretary General Guterres has already asked the members to give him permission to organize an emergency platform, a mechanism by which he could declare global emergencies with, again, no standards. And then he could decide what to do about them and direct the nations to obey. So we don't have treaties yet that have all the details in them as these nations tried to negotiate for a couple of years. But the plan is to get permission to move forward with this at the UN. At the same time, the EU is putting into law similar rules. So again, the EU is controlled by the globalists. The WHO and the UN are controlled by the same globalists. The US government is controlled by them also, as is the Australian government, New Zealand, many governments. What the globalists haven't been able to get so far is control of all the states. And according to the US Constitution, 10th Amendment, any authority that is not specifically enumerated in the Constitution as belonging to the federal government reverts to the states. So that means the states have authority over education, for instance, and healthcare, because they're not discussed in the Constitution. So does Biden have the authority to turn over regulation of healthcare to the WHO or the UN? We say no, the Constitution doesn't give him that authority. And so my group, Door to Freedom, working with the Sovereignty Coalition, the Children's Health Defense, National Vaccine Information Center, Stand for Health Freedom, we have worked on a state strategy as well as a federal strategy and brought to state authorities, attorney generals, governors, and legislatures, the issue that they're in charge of healthcare. Do they want this to get turned over to the WHO or the UN? And so in the last month, on May 1, we had 49 senators, every Republican senator in the US Senate said, no, we're not giving up sovereignty to the WHO. And we demand that if you pass this treaty and the amendments, that they go before the Senate. And then on May 8th, we had 22 all Republican attorneys general say, look, we're not going to be allowing the WHO into our state to give us orders. We're not going to carry them out. And on, I think it was the 22nd of May, we had 24 governors write their own letter to President Biden and say, look, this is not good. We're not letting you do it. We are the primary authority in our state, and that isn't going away. So that's wonderful. We also were working with legislatures. And there are a variety of different bills that have gone through about a dozen legislatures, and some are still sitting there. But yesterday, Louisiana passed in its House. And so Louisiana had passed 37-0, a bill denying jurisdiction to not only the WHO, also the UN and the World Economic Forum about 6 weeks ago. And it went from the Senate to the House. A little bit of language was changed. It went back to the Senate yesterday. The Senate passed it again. It had already been passed in the House. Today, the governor, Jeff Landry in Louisiana, signed it, and they had changed it so that the date it became active was today. So as of today, wow. Louisiana, it doesn't give any jurisdiction to any of those three organizations. Oklahoma.
Great state of Louisiana.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
All right. Oklahoma passed in its House about a month ago a very similar bill, and then it was blocked by Republicans in the Senate. And that block has finally been removed, and it's going to the Senate tomorrow, and then it will go back to the House because it's been slightly amended. And the Oklahoma governor, who already has signed on to a letter to Biden about this, will sign it. So Oklahoma also will be denying jurisdiction to the WHO, the UN, and the World Economic Forum. We have other bills in Alabama that basically are asking the federal government not to go along with, the WHO efforts, but they don't absolutely deny jurisdiction to those organizations in the state. And then, we have a number of other states where these bills will, we hope, move forward next year in the next session. So that's where we are.
Certainly, it's going to create an interesting. It's going to create an interesting sort of momentum to the exodus from certain states if only certain states are allowed to exempt themselves from this nonsense. But it'll be interesting to see. I have a couple of questions. Do you know when they were in this 50-country reconciliation negotiation, do you know which countries gave them the most trouble? I'm guessing they wouldn't listen to the United States. I'm guessing the EU did not give them trouble. Where were they getting? And I have seen certain African leaders speak out about things like this with great concern. So I'm wondering if it came from certain African countries.
Yeah. So, well, there were lots of different contentious issues. So the pharmaceutical industry felt like they were being asked to give up too much, although it wasn't specified exactly how much they had to give up, but they have been against these documents. And even today, in a meeting this afternoon for us, the representative from the International Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association said, we don't like it. So they carry a lot of weight.
Strange bedfellows, but whomever, whoever helps.
Meantime, right, the developing countries, and particularly Africa, because Africa tends to hang together. So there's 54 African nations. Today, they were talking about a group of 47, but that's a lot. There's 194 member states of the WHO. So the African bloc is essentially a quarter of them. And so if you can't get the African bloc to go along, you're going to have a hard time getting your documents through.
Is that what happened? I just smell that as part of the issue.
So they haven't voted as a whole bloc yet, but they've demanded. So what happened is the globalists tried to do two opposite things with these documents. They needed the third world countries. So they said, we're going to give you equity. We're going to give you cheap vaccines. We're going to give you laboratories. We're going to encourage more healthcare workers, et cetera. But the specifics were never written into the documents of how that would happen. And
the way they treat some of these African countries, it's despicable. They just it's like some sort of utility that they can manipulate, and they're sniffing it out. And I've seen some very clear thinking African leaders push back hard on this, and I hope they'll continue to do so.
Yes. So you remember that the leader of Tanzania, who had a PhD in chemistry, very smart, he was assassinated, he died, mysteriously denied. He was in his 50s, healthy guy, during the COVID pandemic when he refused to impose lockdowns and vaccine mandates in his country. So the Ugandan representative today, so now they had bigger meetings. So those were the negotiating teams. Those negotiating teams are done for at least the time being, or maybe forever. Today, they had Committee A discussing these two documents, and then they had a plenary. So they need multiple negotiators from each country or diplomats. The Ugandans said, look, we're not happy about the Director General being able to declare a potential pandemic at whim. He said, we have these diseases in our country all the time. And once he declares one of these, it really affects our economy. So we think there should be standards. We're not going to go along. And I think that would be
shocking.
Probably the rest of Africa.
What crazy thinking. What crazy thinking. What wild thinking. Standards. Who would have thunk? Oh my God. Well, thank you for the work you've been doing. And you came a long way. I just remember when Michelle Bachmann was the only person going, excuse me, we got a problem here. And you got involved, and I think your group and several others have had tremendous effect. So thank you, number one. One last question before I wrap things up. I noticed that Marine Le Pen and the Italian leader Meloni were sort of gathering together some forces for the EU. I'm wondering, is the EU, could it change direction as it pertains to stuff like the World Health Organization treaty, so-called?
So the EU, interestingly, is not a member of the WHO, and somehow weaseled its way into negotiations. So the EU is negotiating for its member states, but can't necessarily vote for them. But they're trying to find a way so that the EU can vote. If anyway, so von der Leyen is 100%, 1,000% in favor of this agenda, but Meloni is not, and I'm sure Marine Le Pen is probably not. The senators in Italy have said that Italy will not be voting in favor of these documents. When the Prime Minister of Slovakia said that 2 weeks ago, he wound up being shot a few days later, and he's been in the ICU.
I remember that. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good idea for heads of state to make their position known ahead of time.
All right. Is there anything you'd like people to do?
Can you have Dr. Nass tell everybody why she's not licensed right now?
Oh,
Somebody was being kind of a
Did they go
troll
after your
on,
license again?
on Russell's.
Well,
I
yet,
think
yet
she
again?
didn't she lose it?
Are you letting
Yeah,
go or
no,
something? Go
yeah,
ahead.
I lost my license. My medical license was suspended at 26 months ago, and I've not gotten it back. But this was probably an act of God to propel me into working on the WHO and giving me the time to do it. So I have no complaints about that, but I cannot write a prescription. And I'm
You don't have to worry about losing it again.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to worry
I
about
wish
losing
Drew
it.
would lose
I know
his
she keeps encouraging me
sometimes.
to let mine go, just so I don't have to worry about this stuff. But are you going to sue the state organization that was so egregious in the way they? I remember discussing with you how this happened and what the ridiculousness was. Is there going to be any sort of legal action there? Do you think?
Yeah.
On your behalf.
So we did sue the board, and oral arguments were in January, and nothing's happened. So I asked my lawyer a couple of days ago, and he said, "Oh, the judge is retiring. He's retiring at the end of the month." I'm like, "What?"
So what does that mean? What does that mean?
Exactly. He hasn't made a ruling yet about whether we move forward or not. Or anyway, that's how things are. And I appealed so that was a lawsuit against them for a malicious prosecution, since it wasn't based on, my ability to practice medicine. And then, we're also appealing. I don't know where those things will go. But what do people need to do? So the pressure of people, by mobilizing lots of people, explaining what was going on at the WHO, and having thousands and thousands of people contacting their elected representatives, that's how this happened. And so don't let up the pressure, because the UN is coming back. The WHO will try to come back with something, and we still have to stop them. But what's happened is they've lost the advantage of stealth. Now people are figured out what this is about, and they're going to have a lot more trouble pushing it through next time. But we've got to keep our eyes on it. So thank you to everyone.
Well, thank you so much.
Who made those calls.
Yes, and I'm sure they feel the same way I do. And gratitude for you for leading the way. So, again, the website where people should go for more information, Dr. Nass?
Yeah, doortofreedom.org.
Great. Thank you
And
so
my
much.
Substack?
And we'll talk soon.
Yeah, Meryl Nass.
Oh, yeah, Substack.
Meryl Nass.
Okay, I've not promoted that, so go ahead.
Thank you.
Got it. Perfect. MerylNass.substack.com. And thank you so much, Dr. Nass. For everyone else, tomorrow is Dr. Victory coming in at normal time, Susan? Is your camera on, by the way, Susan? Can we see you? No. Yes. No. Maybe.
That's Caleb's job.
It's disconnected from when we switch the cameras. Yeah. We'll get it next time.
I can see it on my side, so I'll just look at myself.
Kay Means and Andrew
yes,
Grohl.
tomorrow it is the normal time.
Okay. Rachel Marin, Thomas Pappas, Melissa McAfee, Winston Marshall. It'll be very interesting from the EU. It's going to be an early day. Naomi Wolf and Brian O'Shea have some interesting updates for us as well. So they'll freak us out even further. So we appreciate you all being here. And Susan, anything? I know you're responding to the Rumble Ranchers a little bit there. I could tell.
No, it was just somebody said that, you're platforming and
Platforming.
documented.
Hey, stop. And anybody that says platforming, I don't hear that word ever again. I'm sick of that word. I'm sick of it. I'm having an interview with an American citizen. Yeah, that's it. Period.
No,
and guess what? I don't agree with everything everybody says, but I learned something from almost everyone that comes in here.
Well, that's why I called it out, because I agree with you. Dr. Nass has been through a lot, and she's still moving forward and doing great things for the world. So even though she's not, putting in an IV or waking up at the crack of dawn to take care of all her patients.
She's done plenty of that.
Yeah, she was
MIT
40 years.
trained. Did all you guys go to MIT? Is that where you went to school?
We had Dr. Peter Hotez on the show. We've had Dr. Nikki Mail on the show. We've had the whole variety. All of them that'll come on, we've had them on here. We're not just platforming people. We're having conversations. We're trying to learn the truth here.
That's correct.
Somebody went, ree.
Yeah, we've had Salty
coming back
Cracker
too
too.
this month.
All right. So appreciate you guys being here. Caleb, anything else from your standpoint? Thank you for rolling with our technical issues.
Yeah, I don't have a camera because we had last minute issues.
Well, the audience doesn't know.
We got to make my camera.
We fixed it before.
Yeah, so whatever, right. I don't have any hair and makeup.
Oh, let me, Susan, if you could throw up the thing about Canada maybe, or MyPillow, we'd appreciate that. But yeah, we're going up to British Columbia on June 24th to 27th, I think it is, if that's right. She's got to put the information up for me. And yeah, there you go. Throw that up. Throw that up a little bit. Yeah, Canada's just gotten worse. I think everyone understands that. And I was asked to come up there and speak. Dr. McCullough's coming up. I think Dr. Reich may come up. By the way, we're going to have Justin Trudeau's brother in here very soon. Yeah.
Julian Assange's too.
What's that, Susan? Oh, we got Julian Assange?
His brother. We have like
dad,
we have two brothers coming up.
Oh, yeah,
it's his half brother and then Justin Trudeau's half brother. It's like a week of brothers coming up.
That's great. Well, Trudeau's, of course, invocation of the so-called Emergencies Act aimed at the truckers. You guys remember that? First time that had ever been used. Sort of the banking dissidents and the insane government overreach and programs, the assisted suicide program. There's so much going on up there. And we've got friends up there, and they asked me to come up through the wellness company. And they've got codification of speech laws and surveillance. So next month, check it out. It's June. We're trying to sort of encourage freedom again. June 21st through the 23rd, Susan and I are participating in the 3rd annual Reclaiming Canada Conference. Dr. McCullough, as I said, I think Dr. Reich is going to be there too, Susan. Is that somebody else? Yeah, it's a big panel of people. I'm just one of the many. So, and as I said, I'll be relying on some of Mike Benz stuff as it comes out here. So appreciate that. And then the other thing was to... to address real information. What is that? What's the website? Hang on. Keep going. Let's see where the website is. There you go. Go to weunify.ca. Weunify.ca for more information and tickets. Again, that is weunify.ca. What's going on? Yes, it's in Victoria, not in Vancouver, as Sue keeps saying. And also our friends over at MyPillow, don't forget them. They've been great to work with. They're lovely. Mike's been great. The people are great. And let me give you some of the links to their stuff very quickly. We've been very, very pleased with the stuff that they provided us. Go all the way to the bottom there, Susan, for the call to action. Please, all the way to the bottom. Yeah, that's where it goes. Okay, promo code Dr. Drew, DRW at mystore.com, and also drdrew.com/mypillow. And we've got towels and bed sheets. We got all kinds of stuff from there. We've been very, very happy with it. And Susan was yelling at me for not. She was, keep us moving forward here and keep all of our employees employed, and we would love to
keep Caleb's babies in new shoes.
Susan was yelling at me earlier that I didn't wear my pillow slippers or what are they called?
Beach shoes.
Beach shoes yesterday.
His feet were burning. We were on AstroTurf, and he was like, "This is really hot. The dog's feet are hot." I was like, "Where are your new slippers?"
My mistake.
Yeah, we got to wear those.
All right, so we appreciate you supporting people that support us and that work with us. We can keep doing this, and we appreciate you being a part of it. And contact drdrew.com if you have any suggestions or things you'd like to see in the future. We're happy to read that stuff. Susan checks it all out.
drdrew.com/sponsors.
For all of our sponsors, we appreciate you.
See if you like our lighting, or if you want to know where the links are, or the discount codes are. They're all there. Caleb puts it all together on this website called drdrew.com.
this website. This extraordinary name. What a creative name, too. Okay. We appreciate you all, and we will see you tomorrow at 3 o'clock Pacific time. Dr. Kelly Victory steps in for me. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.